In October 2003, an air taxi driver arrived in Kootenai National Park in Alaska to pick up Timothy Treadwell and his girlfriend, but they were nowhere to be found. Park rangers launched a search and later found Timothy's mangled head, partial spine, and right forearm and hand. Nearby were his girlfriend's partial mutilated remains. Sadly, a large male bear was found protecting the remains and was shot and killed. Human limbs, fingers, and clothing were later found in its stomach. This was the first bear attack at the national park in 85 years. But Timothy wasn't blameless. He spent much of his time encroaching on the bear's territory. He was delusional, though mistaken as brilliant. He believed he was the animal's sole protector, even though he set up shop in places where wildlife is already protected. His girlfriend was terrified of bears, but he convinced her to spend a night in his world. They set up camp at a salmon stream where the bears fed. Timothy was getting ready to film a 28-year-old bear when it attacked. The camera was turned on, but lens cap wasn't removed. As a result, it recorded Timothy's screams of agony, chomping sounds, gurgles, and Timothy's girlfriend yelling in terror. I don't think that any of us would expect to meet our demise by an animal attack on the 6th floor of an apartment in San Francisco, but on January 26, 2001, that's exactly what happened. 33-year-old Diane Whipple was desperately afraid to have a run-in with the couple who lived down the hall. They had inherited 2 huge Mastiff dogs the previous year, and when they lunged at her and tried to bite her, the couple just blamed her. She wasn't even aware that the couple was abusing the dogs or that they had been trained to kill. On that afternoon, she was returning home from grocery shopping when both dogs came barreling at her. They were unattended and off-leash. The male dog immediately went for her jugular, sinking his teeth in, which tore her carotid artery and completely crushed her larynx. She came crashing to the ground in her doorway, allowing full access to both hounds. Over the span of several minutes, they continued to mercilessly attack. She endured gaping wounds to the back of her head, shoulders, and neck. In fact, her neck looked as though it had been slit down to the muscle. The only part of her body left untouched were the soles of her feet. Blood vessels were perforated, and her flesh was just shredded. After her death, the couple gave an interview blaming Diane. They had no remorse. Both were arrested and imprisoned, but the wife was charged with homicide because she was the one home at the time who allowed the dogs to go off leash. She is serving a life sentence, which is exactly what she deserves. In 2010, huge crowds poured into SeaWorld for Dine with Shamu, unaware that their tickets were actually for a real-life horror movie. Only part of the footage has been released, but I have the autopsy report right here, so buckle up. Don Branshaw was one of the trainers for the killer whale who was set to perform. The show began without a hitch, but soon she laid down next to the whale, which was part of the show. Faster than you can blink, Don was whipped under the water. Tourists watched helplessly as the whale emerged with Don in his mouth, violently shaking her. She flailed hard and at one point was released, only to be struck hard in the torso and abdomen. The whale dragged her underwater once again by her arm. The crowd kept getting horrific glances of a woman suffering a terrifying death. Her entire scalp was ripped from her head, her jaw was broken, her spine fractured in several places, her brain was bleeding into her spinal fluid, her sternum and several ribs crushed by the whale's teeth, her liver was torn open and elbow and knee dislocated. It likely took several minutes for her to finally die. It took 5 minutes from the start of the incident for the whale to emerge with her dead body. He continued to hold her body hostage for an additional 30 minutes. After the traumatic incident, divers had to retrieve her scalp from the bottom of the pool. This is why we should never keep animals prisoner and treat them like toys. In the end, SeaWorld did everything in their power to place blame on Dawn, but she was just a trainer reporting for work. Considering that this wasn't a one-time incident, I think we know exactly who is to blame. Her cause of death is listed as a combination of drowning and traumatic injury. I wish I could say it was quick, but sadly it was not.